What do public health experts think of this move? Raywat Deonandan is an associate professor and epidemiologist at the University of Ottawa. Good morning, Raywat.
Good morning.
How helpful do you think this ban will be?
I think it's a prudent move, and it's a step in the right direction. Does it go far enough? That's unclear, but I'm glad something's being done. We have to stop moving infection around the world from hotspot areas to less hotspot areas. So if we're going to have a chance of getting out of this wave more unscathed than the current crisis we're in now, then stopping importing infection is part of that solution.
But how has it worked with other variants? For instance, the UK variant is, I don't know, would you say it's running rampant in Canada now? What's your assessment of how it's worked in
I
that
think
case?
it's the big bad boy on the block right now. It's the thing we have to deal with the most in this country. We banned or we limited travel from the UK, I think, after the barn doors were already open, which is not a bad thing to do. I mean, it's never too late to do the right thing. I think travel restrictions helped. It's hard to quantify how much they helped, but they did help. And this is going to help as well. Of course, the devil's in the details. Are the details sufficient to quell importation? Could we go further? That's unclear.
How do you know when the barn doors are already open? I mean, how do we know that it's already not too late for this travel ban?
It's not too late. We have a handful of cases in Canada of B1617, the so-called Indian variant. But to my way of thinking, numbers matter. You want to prevent new seeding events. You don't want to have these new variants arriving in any significant numbers, causing outbreaks in a variety of places around the country. So the existing cases we have here, one could, in theory at least, contain them with appropriate public health measures and domestic travel restrictions. So long as we are applying our public health assets strategically, then these kinds of travel bans will have a bigger impact.
Does it have to be a total ban? I mean, what about exceptions for compassionate purposes, family members who are very sick or dying? I mean, does it only work when it is a total ban?
I'm on board with having exceptions for compassionate reasons. I think, as a species, we have to put humanity first. Obviously, we already have exceptions for essential travel, and that includes people doing humanitarian work. But in such cases, we have to make sure the public health assets are well applied to make sure those exceptions do not cause issues. So it's important that the quarantine restrictions be really well overseen and enforced. And it's important that the new testing requirements are also well applied. I understand the new restrictions include proof of a negative test before arriving. That is interesting because there is a global industry in counterfeit PCR tests right now, believe it or not. So hopefully they have some oversight to make sure that those tests are genuine.
What do we know about the B1617 variant and how it's different from the other variants?
Well, it has similar mutations to P1, the so-called Brazilian variant, and B1351, the so-called South African variant. It seems to be more transmissible than COVID classic, as I call it, but maybe not as transmissible as B117, the UK variant, which is now dominant in Canada. So it seems to infect people more so. It might be more serious. We don't know. We know that in Maharashtra, the most populated state in India, or one of the most populated states, it may account for 60% of some of the new cases, which suggests it is driving the wave, at least in that part of the country. But the Indian government does not think it's responsible for the overall spike in cases in that country. We think our current vaccines probably have a fair amount of efficacy against it, so don't be overly concerned about that. Variants in general are going to diminish vaccine efficacy to some extent, but all our vaccines have at least some power against them. So our way forward is still continuing with our vaccination strategy.
And when you say that they will affect, that they'll have an effect on efficacy, does that mean that if I am vaccinated, I've received one of the vaccines, that I am more likely to get COVID, but is it still 100% against really critical sickness in the hospitals?
Well, we don't know. So the studies, the way we determine if a vaccine is going to be working well against a new variant is two ways. One is epidemiological, the other is serological. So epidemiologically, we look at the cases in a prevalent place like Maharashtra, India, and compute the fraction of those cases that were previously vaccinated. And that has not been done yet, to my knowledge. And the second, the serological method, is you take blood from a vaccinated person and you expose it to the new variant and see what kind of antibodies are produced. That has been done now, and it looks like the blood is producing sufficient neutralizing antibodies to confer some kind of protection. But we don't know yet if that protection is protection against symptoms, protection against hospitalization, or protection against death. It probably is protection against, at the least, hospitalization. So I'm not overly concerned there.
I'll forgive you if you don't know the answer to this question. You probably do because you're a smart man. But do you know what's gone wrong in India with this? Because at one point, the Indian government had pretty much kind of dusted their hands and said, yep, well, this COVID's under control here. This has been a big success.
Right. So what's happened around the world is the new variants have raised the stakes and have lowered the possibility and probability of non-pharmaceutical interventions to keep things in check. For example, in the UK, we had exponential growth during lockdown because B117 is so virulent. So in India, they're doing a good job. They had their vaccine rollout well underway, but only about 10% of people have had at least one shot so far. And they got kind of lax in using their NPIs, their non-pharmaceutical interventions like mask wearing and distancing. So to put it bluntly, I think they took their foot off the brake too early. So people stopped wearing masks. There's a lot of gathering. They never had a significant amount of economic restrictions for reasons having to do with that country's distribution of poverty. And some people would point to leadership decisions that are problematic around distribution of vaccines and enforcement of mitigation strategies. So there's, like every other country in the world, there's a lot of blame to go around.
Raywat, just finally, while I have you on the line, we're going to be speaking to Dr. Peter Uni, the head of Ontario Science Table, about the Premier's apology yesterday. That's coming up after 7:30. What did you make of it?
I'm one of those people that likes to congratulate people when they apologize. And I take these things at face value. If you're contrite, if you genuinely feel that you made a bad decision and want to go forward in a positive direction, that should be celebrated. So I'm not a fan of looking back at mistakes. I'd rather look forward to see what we can do better now to improve the situation.
Was there anything you wish he had added to that apology?
Well, of course, a faster rollout for paid sick leave. I mean, one thing to say we're looking into it, another thing to say what's the timeline. Not months, weeks, and preferably days would be nice.
Thanks for taking the time to talk to us this morning. Always good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's Raywat Deonandan.